In the fading light of dawn, a young girl named Grace Mwangi walked down a dusty road that led to the city. Her bare feet were sore, her dress torn, but her eyes, those deep, hopeful eyes, were full of dreams. She had just turned 17. In her small village, far away from the noise of the city, people said Grace was different. She spoke softly, listened carefully, and smiled even when life gave her nothing to smile about. But poverty has a way of silencing even the brightest hearts. Her mother, an old woman with gentle hands, had whispered to her before she left, "Grace, wherever you go, remember, silence does not mean weakness. It only means you're waiting for the right moment to speak." Those words echoed in her mind as she reached the tall iron gates of the Thompson residence, a house so grand that even the walls seemed to look down on her. A guard opened the gate, staring at her with cold eyes. "You're the new maid?" he asked. Grace nodded. "Go in. Madam's waiting." The house was filled with the smell of polish and perfume. Every corner shined, but it felt empty. In the center of the living room stood Mrs. Thompson, a woman in her late 40s, dressed in a silk gown, holding a cup of coffee like a queen holding her crown. "You're late," she said without looking at Grace. "I'm sorry, Grace replied softly. "Sorry doesn't clean the floor. Start with the kitchen." Grace lowered her head and walked quietly. She had expected kindness. Instead, she found a world built on commands and silence. Hours passed. She washed, scrubbed, wiped, and swept until her hands trembled. No one said thank you. No one even looked at her face. At lunch, she stood in the corner as the family ate together. When they finished, Mrs. Thompson pointed to the plate. "Eat if you want, whatever's left." It wasn't an offer. It was a reminder of her place. Grace sat alone by the sink, eating the leftovers slowly. The food tasted of salt and shame. Outside the window, the night was silent, but Grace's heart was not. Ever since she had seen those papers, the names, the faces, something inside her refused to rest. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, those photographs appeared again, girls like her, all black, all poor, all working for different homes around the city. And the list, it had numbers written beside each name. Amounts of money, payments. She didn't understand everything, but she knew one thing for sure: something terrible was happening behind those beautiful white walls. The next morning, she tried to act normal. Mrs. Thompson ordered her around as usual. "Grace, the silver plates need polishing. And make sure the windows are spotless, we're having guests tonight." Grace nodded, pretending to listen, but her thoughts were miles away. In the quiet of the kitchen, she whispered to herself, "If I tell someone, they won't believe me. Who would believe a maid?" The door creaked open. It was Ethan Thompson, the couple's only son, around 19, tall, quiet, always buried in books. He had always treated Grace with distant politeness, but today, his eyes looked curious. "You're new here, right?" he asked. Grace nodded, unsure if she was even allowed to speak. "My mother said you came from up country," he continued. "Is it hard there?" Grace smiled faintly. "Hardness is different when you're used to it." He didn't reply, but for the first time, Grace saw something human in this house: kindness. That night, guests arrived, men in suits, women in sparkling dresses. Grace served drinks and food quietly, unnoticed among the laughter and perfume. But behind their smiles, she felt something strange. Every now and then, Mrs. Thompson led one of the women upstairs for a private talk, and when they returned, they looked pale and anxious. Grace's curiosity grew stronger, though fear pulled her back every time. Still, her mother's words echoed in her mind: silence does not mean weakness. Whenever. The air inside the storage room was heavy, filled with dust and darkness. Grace sat on the cold floor, her knees drawn to her chest. She had lost count of the hours. The only sound was the faint ticking of a clock outside and the distant hum of the city, a world still moving while she was trapped in silence. But deep inside her, something had changed. Fear had turned into fire. She remembered her mother's words again, the ones she had written on the first page of her notebook. "When the world shuts its doors on you, build your own." Grace didn't cry anymore. She waited. It was Ethan who finally found her. Late that night, he snuck into the storage room with a flashlight in one hand and a key in the other. "Grace," he whispered urgently, "are you okay?" Her eyes blinked in the sudden light. "How did you?" "I heard everything. My mother told the guards you stole something. She's going crazy. We don't have much time." He unlocked the door, and Grace stumbled out, weak but determined. "Did you contact the journalist?" she asked. Ethan nodded. Yes. His name is Daniel Reed. He's already seen the files. He's coming here tomorrow, but we need proof that you're real, that the stories in those files are true. Grace's voice trembled. Then I'll tell him. I'll tell everything. The next morning came heavy with tension. Mrs. Thompson acted calm, but her eyes burned with suspicion. Mr. Thompson looked pale and distracted, avoiding his wife's gaze. Grace tried to work like usual, sweeping floors, washing dishes, but every tick of the clock made her heart pound faster. At noon, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Thompson's voice called out sharply, "Grace, get that." She walked to the door, her hands trembling. A man stood there tall, in his 30s, wearing a simple jacket and holding a small camera bag. "Good afternoon," he said politely. "I'm Daniel Reed. I have an appointment with Mrs. Thompson." Grace froze. Daniel Reed, the journalist. She turned. The sun rose slowly over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. For the first time in months, Grace Mwangi felt a quiet peace settle over her. The Thompson residence was no longer a prison. The walls that had echoed with commands, insults, and fear were silent now. But Grace knew the silence wasn't empty. It was waiting, ready for something new. News of the Thompsons' arrest had spread far and wide. People were talking about Grace, the young maid who dared to speak, who dared to reveal the truth. She received letters, emails, and messages from strangers, thanking her, admiring her courage, and sharing their own stories of abuse and survival. One morning, Daniel Reed called her. "Grace," he said, "I want to make sure your story doesn't end here. Will you meet me at the shelter?" She nodded. The shelter was small, filled with rescued girls and women who had once been trapped in silence just like her. She walked in quietly, observing the faces around her, fear, uncertainty, but also relief and hope. One girl approached her, timidly. "Are you really the one who spoke up?" she whispered. Grace knelt down and smiled gently. "Yes, I am. And so can you. You have a voice too." Days turned into weeks, and Grace began helping at the shelter. She taught the girls to write, to speak, to tell their stories. Her blue notebook, the one her mother had given her, became a guide, a companion, and a symbol of hope. She called her initiative the Voice of Grace. Through workshops, letters, and online platforms, she reached out to girls who had been silenced by fear, poverty, or oppression. Ethan stayed by her side, now a true ally, using his privilege to help amplify the voices of the powerless. Together, they organized events, created awareness campaigns, and connected with journalists and charities. Grace's days were busy, filled with purpose. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, she would sit by her window and remember the dark rooms.